Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live today. Today, we're going to talk about a very specific subject, and we're going to focus on the part that is. Wait 1 second. I fix my microphone. Okay, I'm back again. So, welcome to this live today. Today, we're going to talk about maintenance, prevention, and prediction of failures. And what we are going to talk about is that many times there you have breakdowns, you have machine breakdowns, you have quality issues on the shop floor, but they are never out of a sudden, they are never without warning. Usually, data are going to warn you about the major failures on the shop floor and about the major failures on the machines. So that's where we are going to cover today. And we are going to also see practical examples from my experience and from my career, how data prevented machine breakdowns and how very small problems as a valve that was clogged create big machine problems. So, um, welcome to my live. And as always, this is Andreas Letros, and welcome to my live. Machine breakdowns don't happen overnight. Hint, data will warn you. And in the average factory, usually the quality department or the maintenance department are going to do the firefighters, are going to be the ones that are reactive, and they are going to be the ones that are going to interfere every time that there is something urgent. And this is how it looks like to have an interview as a maintenance specialist. You take the job, and then your job is basically when the phone rings, they tell you to fix the problem, and then what you have to do is to run. There is no other way, and that seems to be like the job of a maintenance person. I think that when someone works in the maintenance, is the most stressful part of the factory. And there are three types of maintenance. There is the corrective maintenance, the preventive maintenance, and the predictive maintenance. About the corrective maintenance is what I'm talking about right now. Is when you have an urgent issue and someone calls you and you go to fix the problem. This is the firefighting. This is um, this is about to fix the problem as quickly as possible so that the production line will never stop working. Although the preventive maintenance is more about following the documentations. For example, you know that these valves need to be changed every 3 years. You need to stop the machines every 6 months to do some maintenance. You follow the documentations from uh, the suppliers of the machines. You need to change, and you need to change the tubes. You need to change the tools you're using, and that's preventive because you prevent errors before they happen. On the other side, there is the predictive, what we are going to talk about today. The predictive is when actually you predict the failures by watching at the data. You look at the data and then you can predict that the failure is going to happen, so you interfere quicker. Um, in a factory, you should definitely have all three of them, but in the traditional factories, the problem is that most of the organizations are have the corrective maintenance, sometimes the preventive and predictive. They don't even know what it is. And if I have to tell you actually how it works, this is actually the difference, the main difference between the corrective and the predictive maintenance. So when you have the data, the predictive maintenance interferes much quicker when the trend starts going up. Instead, the corrective maintenance, because they have no idea what's happening, they have no access to the data, they interfere when it gets red, when the machine stops, and when the production is not cannot really work anymore. This is the big difference between the predictive and the corrective, and actually that's the big difference between doing urgent stops, doing costly stops, risking the machine to have a more failure, um, stressing everybody out, losing production. That's a big difference between doing the maintenance when it's actually uh, when you have time, when you have a lot of time at your disposal, because you predict that at some point you will have an error and you interfere proactively, or you interfere reactively when the machine stops. That's a big difference between them. And breakdowns are a series of small, tiny daily degradations that get augmented, accumulated day by day. It's not something random, and then something breaks. And those daily degradations are impossible to observe physically during a busy day of work. And unfortunately, these behaviors are not really, it's not really possible to see them also from the machine monitor. Maybe you have some degradations that affect the machine parameters, but it's not very easy to see them from the machine monitor for a very specific reason. You can only understand them by seeing the trends of the machine data, and this is the reason why you cannot really see them from the monitor. On the monitor, you can see the data that are happening at the moment. Maybe if you watch at the temperature, for example, you will see that there is the temperature 36 degrees, 38 degrees, 40 degrees, 23 degrees. You see the moment how it works. But the real thing is when you have the data, you may watch one of those observations that you see on my screen, but so you can see me a little bit more. Um, but uh, you are from the machine monitor, you are not able to see the trends. You are not really able to see how your data fluctuating, and you cannot really see how many points are outside of the tolerance for your for your specific parameters. So that's a very big thing to think about. And just by watching at the monitor, you are able to make the machine work. You are able to, of course, um, have the basic supervision of the machine, but you cannot predict failures. You cannot work your machine optimally, and you cannot really do predictive maintenance. And actually, when by having the data of the machine and watching them, visualizing them correctly, it guarantees that you will see all the hidden signals that the machine is showing you, so that you can have the possibility to run the machine at the optimal levels for as long as possible. And the thing is, you can see that when you are analyzing your data, this is an example of predictive maintenance. The predictive maintenance allows you to interfere when there is a problem, to predict it, and not really arrive to the point that you have to do firefighting. And this is really an example of how it works. For example, you may see a trend on your temperature. If you have access to those data, you're not allowing your temperature to go out of the target. When you see the trend, you interfere before it becomes red, and that's the easiest way to understand it. And actually, that I'm going to show you right now my favorite example from predictive maintenance that I've ever had. And it was actually the first time I analyzed the data. When I was looking a little bit like this, like when I was, and I had hair, I was 23 years old. That was the first time I did predictive maintenance in a factory. And I was working with um, injections on foaming injections, and we had to analyze the temperature for each injection. And what happened is that we have a healthy injection that if we have data like this, you will figure out that if you take by hour the mean and the range by hour, you will see that the mean is inside the tolerances and the range is slower than, you don't really have a very high variability between the, the measurements. On the other side, an unhealthy and defective injector, we figured out it look a little bit like this. Maybe the mean is inside the tolerances, but the range is fluctuating so much, as you can see on my screen right now. And on if you just watch on the machine monitor, it's you're going to see a machine working perfectly. But this is a defective injector, and actually I was doing this analysis first time I came in a factory, and of course um, there was no predictive maintenance, and there was always this corrective maintenance on place. And and so the first time I saw that all the injectors were working correctly, apart from this one that had we had 10 injectors, and one of them were working in the way that you can see in my screen. And actually, what happened is that I called the head of maintenance. I showed him the data, and he asked the technician to go and see. And actually, the technician didn't really want to go and see. He was like, "This is working correctly, right? There is no problem. The machine conductor didn't tell me to do anything. It works perfectly. I see the parameters are working correctly, so there is no need to interfere." And the head of the maintenance asked 3 times to interfere. And actually, because the technician didn't really want to interfere, he insisted, and he told him, "I am the boss. You have to go and check." And actually, after the technician checked, he realized that the valve was very dirty. It was clogged up. It was not injecting correctly. That's why we could see all this variability on the data. And when the technician did that, he said, "Thanks to that, we interfered quickly and we didn't have a machine breakdown." And that's a little bit showing a little bit the culture that it's not only about the data at the end of the time. So I'll close here. Uh, but this is what I showed you right now is the power of having predictive maintenance. And it's not only about having the data. As you saw in my example, we had the data, we had the indication and the actionable insights. It was we had 10 injectors that were working correctly, and we had one injector that was not working as it should be. It was very obvious that we had to interfere. But there are two things that you have to keep in mind when you do predictive maintenance. One is the data. You really need to have great data, you have great actionable insights, and the person that makes the dashboards and analyze the data should know your production very well in order to do that. You need to be able in one click to just understand if your machine is working correctly or not working correctly. But the other thing is the culture. It's very important to keep attention of the culture, and especially if you work with all technicians, with all the maintenance specialists, and they are going to insist to do the corrective maintenance. They are insisting that they should interfere only when it's urgent or only when the supplier is asking for preventive maintenance. And you have to change a little bit the culture. And this is going to take some time. And of course, that's why I always insist that when you apply a process control on your factory, you need to have a supplier that is going to help you both to analyze the data and have the dashboards that will give you the insights, but also help you create the culture. They also help you give stories, give you their opinion, and help the technicians to change their mindset about this. When we have a problem, we always need to interfere when we can, because if we wait too much, we're going to have a breakdown. So I'm going to conclude right now. It was a very short this one, but what I wanted to say is that to give you the summary of what I said is that when you have breakdowns, usually they're not out of nowhere. There are very little degradations that happen over time, and these degradations are not going to be visible from the machine conductor or the automation leader, but they are going to affect the parameters of the machine in an indirect way. And the only way to understand that is by watching the data, is by comparing, um, is by having an ideal state of your machine and comparing your current state to that, actually. And when you see trends, when you see big variability, when you see unexpected things happening, spikes, very big fluctuations, this is when you know that at some point you will have a breakdown. You can't let it pass. And this is how predictive maintenance work. You predict that there's going to be an error there. So if you are suffering from a lot of downtimes, if you suffer from having slow production, stopping production, um, very uh, very often, then we can work together. I can create a dashboard for you. I can create a pros control system that is going to take your data and predict the failures that is going to happen. And I will help you get the culture on place so you can start from day one to get results and actually reduce the downtime. You don't really need to get new machines. You don't really need to do to change technicians. What you really need to do is to think sometimes outside of the box, apply the new technology that's out there that was not here 20 years ago, and mm, predict the failures before they happen. So, thank you very much and see you in the next live that is going to happen next week. Bye bye.